Hello, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Chukas, and we're in between Gimel Tammuz, which is the Yom Ha'ilula of the Rebbe, and also the beginning of the Frierdiker Rebbe's redemption from prison, which culminated in Yud Beis Tammuz, which is this week, Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. But it started at Gimel Tammuz when he was released from prison and he went into exile. So today we are going to speak a thought of the week, and as we said many times, Midaf learn with the Parsha, Midaf learn with the Parsha Shavuot. We have to live with the Parsha of the week, which means not only to learn it but to live with it. What message is Hashem giving me this week? As we'll soon see, the message will be related to Gimel Tammuz and Yud Beis Tammuz. But first, as usual, since the war started, we get Stocker, Gdel Stocker, Shemakarev Segula, Mashiach now. The war should be over, all the Hassas should return, and Mashiach should come. We'll say a pasuk, Vayay Yisrael Esiyod Agdel Asheroso Adinoi B'Mitzrayim. So this was a verse of davening. It's from the Chumash in Oz Yashir, and it says that before Oz Yashir starts, that the Yidden saw the great hand that Hashem did in Mitzrayim, and they believed in Hashem and in Moshe. So, very interestingly, I didn't realize before, Parshas Chukas, which is always in the neighborhood of Gimel Tammuz, either the week of Gimel Tammuz, the week after Gimel Tammuz, and the original Gimel Tammuz Nun Dalid 1994 was on early Yom Aleph, the Parshas Chukas. So many people have discussed what's the connection between Parshas Chukas and Gimel Tammuz. One of them is a very obvious one, but today we're going to connect two. There's something right at the beginning of the Parsha, and there's something in Shvi at the beginning of Shvi. Now, when something is a message at the beginning and the end, that's a double message and a very powerful message because it's at the beginning and at the end. Now, what is it at the beginning? We mentioned this recently, but this time we'll read it inside. We're speaking about the Parah Aduma. That's the beginning of the Parsha. Zeis Chukas HaTorah. And the Pasuk says, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'yichre lecha. Sorry. First Pasuk of the Parsha says, V'daber Hashem al Moshe v'al Aaron leimer. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron. Then it says, Zeis Chukas HaTorah shetziva Hashem leimer, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'yichru elecha Parah Aduma tmima. They should bring to you a Parah Aduma red heifer. Asheim b'mum ashlo eleh oil. Okay. So Rashi over here, Bavorin, straight away, what does it mean? V'yichru elecha, that they shall take to you. And Rashi says, Lo'ola minikras al shmecha, it shall eternally be called by your name, be ascribed to you, Parah shosa Moshe b'midbar, the cow that Moshe prepared in the wilderness. So, Rashi over here is straight away by warning. In the beginning it says, Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron. But then all of a sudden he says, to Moshe alone. And in general, this is what we spoke a couple of weeks ago about Ma'ayin Li Basar. If you remember, it could be with Parshas Balois when we're speaking about Moshe and this Canaan, how everything starts from Moshe. We spoke about Baal Loischa when it comes to something even that's Aaron's thing. Excuse me. Even something which is Aaron's mitzvah is connected to Moshe, because over there it says, now so too over here. The whole Avodah of Parah Aduma is something which is connected to the Kohen Gadol and to Kohanim. They are the only ones that can bring purity to the Jewish nation. That's their job. Nevertheless, even in such a thing, where does it start from? V'yichru elecha Parah Aduma. And not only that they have to bring first the parah to Moshe, and he burns the cow. And by the way, the Pashta Pshat is, what does it mean that it's always going to be connected to you? Because it took from the ashes, which is used in the purification process, from the first cow, every other cow that needed to be burnt for the following generations and 1,000 years to use for the purification process, in those ashes that were used from every cow, they always had a remainder, a bit of the ashes that was left from the first cow that was burned through Moshe. That's what it means, la'olam, forever it's going to be connected to you, because in every single purification process of every single Jew that needed it, it's going to be mixed in with the ashes that was a result of the actions of Moshe Rabbeinu. So over here's the obvious question, why? Why do we need it to be dafka through Moshe, and especially the irony in something which is particularly connected to the Kohanim, that they're the ones that do the whole process, but still the first one has to be done through Moshe. And by the way, over here the emphasis that it's connected to Moshe is more than every other mitzvah. V'haraya, we don't see that it's stressed in any other mitzvah or all the other mitzvahs. Wherever it does stress, like I said before, Shem and Zayizach, there'll have to be an explanation. So to over here, there has to be an explanation. Why by Parah Aduma do we say La'olam Nikras Al Shmecha has to always be attributed to Moshe? So that's the beginning of the parsha. So to understand this, let's look at the end of the parsha. Shvi, what does the pasuk say? Vayishlach Yisrael Malachim. Israel, the Jewish nation, sent emissaries to the king of Sichain, Melech HaAmori, king of the Amorim, Lamer, to tell them that we want to pass through the land, and we shall not turn off to field or vineyard. We shall not drink the water of a well. On the king's road shall we travel until we pass through your border. So Moshe is making a gesture of peace. He doesn't want to go to war with them, to Sichain. And Rashi over here says, Vayishlach Yisrael Malachim, here the pasuk says Yisrael, as the nation, so to speak, sent the emissaries. Shenema, no, and then another pasuk it says Moshe. Shenema ve'eshlach malachim mimidbar kedemis. I sent messengers. So it's talking about Moshe. And v'chein, we find another contradiction. One pasuk says Vayishlach Moshe malachim mikodesh al melech Edom. One pasuk says Moshe sent emissaries to the king of Edom, and concerning the same exact happening and event, it says Vayishlach Yisrael malachim el melech Edom. So first it says Vayishlach Moshe, then it says Yisrael. Anyways, Rashi says one pasuk needs the other. The Rebbe explains this diuk in the Rashi Sikha. What does it mean? Zen noel v'zeh pesach. But the point is to teach us that Moshe hu Yisrael. Moshe is the entire nation. V'Yisrael and Moshe. Lo melecha, to tell you, Shenasi Ader, the generation's leader, is like Kicholade, is like the entire generation. Kianosi hu akel, for the leader is everything. Now the basis of what I'm going to say now, interestingly, is two sichas, Chelik Lamed Gimel of Likutei Sichas, two sichas in volume 33 of Likutei Sichas, Chukas Aleph and Chukas Beis. Chukas Aleph is about V'yichei Lecha, and Chukas Beis is about this Rashi Sicha. So see there for the full package, so to speak, but I'm just going to give you the kernel and mix it up a bit. Okay, so what the Rebbe says over here, bottom line is that the chiddush of this Rashi is that first he starts off by saying that the Nasi Ader is Kichol Ader, which that means that the leader of the generation is equal to all the people of the generation. Talking about the people that he leads, that they're all equal. But then he adds to that, that the leader is everything, is not only equal to the people, as if we say we have Moshe's on one scale and all the on the other scale and they're equal. No, means everything everything that is connected to the generation comes from the Nasi, from the leader. But first, let's talk about other place where it says this. There's a pasuk in Shemos. I thought I brought the Chumash in front of me. Oh yeah, hold on a second. There's a pasuk right away in the beginning of Pashas Yisrei, the famous pasuk where it says, "Vayishma Yisrei." Yisrei heard all the miracles that happened to the Yidden, and the pasuk says, "Vayishma Yisrei came mid Yechesem Mishna Eskazos Elikim LeMoshe ULYisrael Amei." That the Eibishter performed all these miracles for Moshe and for the Yidden. So you might think that we're talking about different miracles. There are miracles that Hashem performed to Moshe. Moshe happened in his private life. And then there's other miracles that the Eibishter did for the entire Jewish nation. So Rashi says, Lim Moshe Yisrael, no. We're not talking about separate miracles. We're talking about the same miracles. But why does the pasuk Torah shebichsav, Hashem himself spells out both, adds another word, LeMoshe Ul Yisrael, Shokul Moshe Keneged Kol Yisrael. The reason why the pasuk brings them both together is to bring out this point that Moshe was equal to all of Israel. So that's number one. So therefore, when similarly over here, you could say the first pshat, when you say that Nosei Ader Kechol Ader, when you say Moshe Rabbeinu was equal to everyone, similar to what it says over there. But really, so let's take two steps over here. One step is, what does it mean a leader? A leader means that his job description is that he's associated, he's a public servant. That's what he's all about. That's what his life is all about. And therefore he has to worry and care about all the people. That's one level. Then there's another level. You could still think that there's the public servant. There's an aspect of this person that he's a public servant and that it's public. But then what about his private life? What about the way he is lifnai v'lifnim? What about the way he is behind closed doors? Does he have a life? Does he have any aspect about his identity, about his being, that's for himself? The answer is no. However, we're going to explain it. But this is what it teaches us when we say over here, number one, she'nasi ader kechol ader, and even more than that, ke'anasi wa'koil, he is completely for the generation, and the generation is completely connected to him. That's what it means. That's what the Rebbe is pshat over here. So, just to bring an example of this, there's a couple of places where the Rebbe brings out this point. One point is the famous Maimer in Chelek Meluket. See there, a Maimer of Chukas, where he speaks about V'yichoi lecha paradum and that concept. I'm not going to read you what it says there because that's a bit deep, but I'm just going to read to you over here what I find is most astonishing and startling and amazing. That's the Yom Yom of Chavtes here, where he says, Aliyas HaNeshama, I mentioned this before, the Neshama elevates itself and rises and goes from level to level by every single prayer, 3 times a day. The souls of tzaddikim go from level to level. And listen to these words over there, my friends. V'davar vadai, it's guaranteed. Asher b'chol eis u'b'chol makom kodesh yosam. Every single time and place, wherever the holiness is, whatever level it is, noisim rino tefila ba'adam u'kusharim aleim v'pukudosam b'shem pukudayim. So this is what he says over here. See there. There's no question about it that wherever they go, they bring a prayer to those that are connected to them and those that follow the instructions and go on their ways. So here we see clearly that you might think to yourself, maybe there's a level where the Rebbe goes, where the leader goes, and he goes there himself. That's not associated to the people that are just his followers, because he's so much higher. And that's the paradox that the Rebbe speaks about in that sikh over there. And he explains it in the word nasi. In the source where the Rashi takes this from, it says Reish Ader, Ukechol Ader. But Rashi changed it and said nasi, because the word nasi brings it up more. If you say head, so you could say that there's a head of a body. That means it's the leader, but it still has some connection to the body. True, it always takes the body along with the head, but it doesn't speak of such a great exaltedness and such a great remimus and isnasus miloshen nasi. When we say the word nasi, that means we're talking about something which is in a differently, completely, beyond. There's no words to describe the loftiness and the elevation and the isnasus atzmis of what a nasi is. That's why you use the word nasi. Nasi emphasizes the greatness more than the word Rosh. But on the other hand, the Rebbe says that's the paradox of the nasi, that even though he's nasi, the unbelievable accomplishment is that wherever he is, whatever level of heights he reaches, in the greatest of heights and the heights of heights, nevertheless, he carries along everyone who's connected with him. That's how the Rebbe learns Pshat. See there. And this is also, now let's go back to the beginning of the Parsha, in the Sikha of Chukas. Let's go back to, so why does it have to be through Moshe? So number one, it's not a question, why does it have to be through Moshe? Because since we say, Hanasi hu akoil, there's not one thing that can happen in the generation to his people that's not related to Moshe. Whether you want to use the analogy of a head, by definition, the head is attached to the body, and the body is attached to the head. Is there anything that can happen in the body that's not related to the head? That's number one. But number two, and particularly the nasi, because that's how shows you how great, and this point, and that's why by Parah Aduma it has to be emphasized more, because what's Parah Aduma? Parah Aduma is the worst kind of lowliness, toxicity you could imagine. Sholish, klippus, atmeis, avia, veisatuma, the worst thing, that the samahepech, the polar opposite, the furthest of the furthest you can get from something in Kedusha is Parah Aduma. The concept of death. Tumas mes. So we have the polar opposite. There's Kedusha, holiness, and there's Klippah. So if we're talking about the lowest of the low, the worst of the worst, the only thing that has the power to combat and to be the antidote of the lowest of the low and the worst of the worst is precisely the highest of the highest. So what does Moshe Rabbeinu represents? Life. Moshe Rabbeinu represents the ultimate of life because he's the ultimate connection to Hashem. And Moshe in particular, the Gemara in Soita, Daf Yud Gimel, Omid Beis, says the word over there that the Gemara says that V'yashemim loy mes Moshe did not die. Ksiv hacha v'yom Hashem ksiv hasam sham v'yi sham im Hashem. And the Gemara says Ma la'al noimid mishamesh, just like over there when it said the word im, yeah, when it said sham, and it meant Ma la'al noimid mishamesh, afkan oimid mishamesh. So in other words, he's still doing his job. And this is the opinion of Teres Achsidis, is Pashtusa de Moshe B'chol Dora V'Dora. So this is true about every single Rebbe, that the Rebbe represents the idea of life, and the idea of Kedusha, Etzam HaKedusha, the highest level, that could bring out the godliness and revive whatever situation, just like Moshe Rabbeinu. So therefore, since Moshe Rabbeinu represents the opposite of death, Moshe Limes, so therefore the spirit, the juice of what the DNA of what Moshe Rabbeinu is, that has to be injected into the paraduma. Why? Into the solution to Tumas mess, and so too it's forever and ever. Because Moshe Rabbeinu represents Nitzchias, eternity. Moshe Emes, Terase Emes, anything which is Kedusha, which is true infinity, is eternal and connected to the side of holiness. So therefore it had to be V'yichei Lecha. It had to be from Moshe, and Moshe has to continue it through all the other. The spirit of Moshe is for all generations the concept of bringing holiness and purity and cleanliness in a good way, clarity to any place where there's confusion, darkness, and impurity. In the Maimer of Chelekei, the Rebbe gives a different beer, but it's all the same. Over there he speaks about Mesiras Nefesh and Bittul, it's all the same thing. Only the tzaddik, which is completely nullified, and the highest level, so he's like, so to speak, transparent, he becomes the ultimate conduit for the ultimate power and empowerment of infinity of Hashem. So now we understand V'yichei Lecha, and now we understand also what it means, why Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who's the Mamutza Mechaber. This is the way the Eibishter set it up. There should be a Moshe Rabbeinu who relates to the people, Ish Elikim, he's a human being, but at the same time, he's the full power of Hashem's infinity to be able to bring hope and salvation and miracles and transcending nature on every single level without any limits. So there's two stories I'd like to say, which I don't know if I ever said it before. One story is a story that happened with the Friedrich Rebbe. We're talking about Gimel Tammuz and Yud Beis Tammuz. Gimel Tammuz, the Friedrich Rebbe was sent into exile to the city of Kastarama. Now, mind you, thank God, even that exile was not like the exile, let's say, like the Rebbe's father was sent into exile and he was sent to some inhumane place, like a desert, where there was no food, the hunger was terrible, and the physical circumstances was terrible. The heat was terrible. He was surrounded by animals and pigs and the neighbors. It was terrible, terrible exile for the Rebbe's father. After he was in prison for 4 or 5 years and tortured. But the Friedrich Rebbe, when he was sent in exile from Gimel Tammuz, which turned out to be only, in the end, a couple of days, 10, 12 days, even though he was meant to be sent there for 3 years, he was sent to a city. This city was like 1,000 miles away from where all the Yidden lived, all the Jewish cities, so to speak, Moscow, Leningrad, where all the Chabad Chassidim were. So he was separated, cut off from all the Chassidim. And he was sent to a city called Kastrama. So it's more like a house arrest. But nevertheless, it was terrible. Imagine the Rebbe, and he's in Kastrama, and he's in exile. And this is what the Friedrich Rebbe said when he was there. Es ist schon bald a Chodesh, als ich hab nicht geschrieben wegen Tineke shel Beis Rabban. Was darf man haben Finger? He looked at his hand, and he said, what do I need fingers for if I can't write about educating Jewish children? The Rebbe repeated this story also, and he spoke about it in general. He couldn't communicate correspondence with the Chassidim when he was in exile because he was a prisoner. They were looking at every single thing he was doing, and the whole point of exile is he has no freedom. The Friedrich Rebbe looked at his hand, and the Rebbe says, the Rebbe explained in the Sikha of Shlach, Tafshin Beis, that this is a hand that put on film. I mean, it was involved in the act of putting on film and giving stock in, etc., etc., etc. And nevertheless, he looked at his fingers and he said, Was darf man haben Finger? If his fingers can't be involved in helping another Jew, then he has no fingers. They're worthless. Chas v'sholem. He looked at his holy fingers and he said, Was darf man Finger? Why? Because Anosi hu hakol. If my job description, my totality not just a job description, that I'm a public servant. But there's no private I. There's no me. My totality, my me, and my very essence is the people that I lead and the people that are connected to me and the entire generation. And I have to be involved in all the details of the people of the entire generation. That's why the Frierdiker Rebbe says what he says. There's another story where you see a lady came to the Rebbe after Machne Yisrael Yechidus. The Rebbe spoke about things, and this lady comes to the dollar, and the Rebbe gives her $1, and the Rebbe tells her she speaks Hebrew. She was an Israeli. Avoidasi shali, my avodah is lis'arev binyanim hapratim shel kol hapoinim elai. My job is to mix into the details of the people that turn to me. And then she says, this lady says, it's a smart observation, wise. She tells the Rebbe, after the Rebbe tells her this, this was more precious to me, more valuable to me than everything you said till now. Now, on one level, you could say, it seems like a very small concept. Oh, because you're worried about me and my life and my details. When you speak about things like Torah and mitzvahs and peace in the world, that sounds like it's huge, mega. But when you come down to speak about, the Rebbe told me that he cares about me and my details and my personal life, that's more important than everything else. That's one way to learn Pshat. But I'm learning it a different way. What she said is ultimately Taka, the ultimate. Because what's Pshat Anosi Hu HaKol? That is the definition. This is the definition of a Jewish leader, of Anosi Hu HaKol, that all the details of the people that are his followers and are connected to him, and as a matter of fact, the entire generation, everything is important to him. How are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your health? What's up? What's your life about? Please, I'm interested. I want to know about the details of your life. That's a Pshat Hanosi Hu HaKol. It's not only about the people. It's about their needs. It's about their life. It's about every single detail of their life and the physical aspects of their life. That's what's so important. And that's what means Hanosi Hu HaKol. Everything, the details about the entire generation has to do with the Rebbe. And this is why we find by Lubavitcher Rebbe's, people have brought out this point again and again, that the Rebbe is not the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe is the Rebbe. And that's why we see that the interest of all the Rebbeim from the Alter Rebbe onward were about matters that are connected to Gans Klal Yisrael, time and time again, with whatever label Jew you are. If you're a Jew, the Rebbe is interested in the details and making sure that it should be good for everyone. So this is the point between Gimel Tammuz and Yud Beis Tammuz, and the message that we're getting from this week's Parsha, from the beginning of the Parsha to the end of the Parsha. Every single one of us should connect with Nasi Hador, is Pashtusha de Meisha B'chol Dora V'Dora, and the more we are connected to the Tzaddik, then the more the powers of the Tzaddik help us. And the Eibusha should help, that we should be reunited with the Rebbe, and then by this Yud Beis, Yud Gimel Tammuz, we should be verbringing with the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe, take it from a yard, mamish, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarich, your man in Melbourne.